All right, so we are going to just go ahead and jump right into the second half of Genesis chapter 29. We're going to start at verse 15 and we're going to work our way all the way through the end, which is verse 35. So we have talked through Jacob arriving in Haran, meeting his uncle Laban and his cousin Rachel. So in verse 15, a month has passed since he arrived. And so Laban says to Jacob, he comes and he says, because you're my family, you can't just stay here and work and be part of this household. Now, working didn't mean he worked for him like an employee. It meant that because he was in the household, he pulled his weight. He's a shepherd. He's outside taking care of sheep. He's helping his uncle take care of his house. He's helping with the upkeep of the houses. He's helping with the management of the animals. He's helping with, catching, hunting, preparing food, that type of thing. So he's like, look, you can't just live here and just, take care of the stuff that I own. What are the wages? What do you want for your work? Like, do I have to pay you? Or there's a certain number of things you want to take away? Like, what do you want for your time and your work as part of my household? You're not working just for room and board. And so Laban has two daughters. We talked about Rachel before because we met Rachel already, but she has an older sister named Leah. Now, in verse 17, this is something that has been highly contested for a long time. It talks about Leah being tender eyed, is the wording that's used in the Old Testament. There are a bunch of different people who have gone back and researched through the original languages and the wording used to determine what this means for her. And so some people have interpreted it to be cross-eyed. Some people have interpreted it to mean that she had like weak eyesight. It I have heard a number of different ideas, but every point of research that I have that stands, everything that I've been able to figure out for myself and has been supported by other commentaries and other researchers on this means that she just wasn't as pretty as her sister. I have heard tender eyed, I've heard weak eyed. I don't think there was anything wrong with her eyes. I think she just might have looked too much like her daddy. Like she just wasn't the prettiest of the girls. Or she wasn't fair by that culture's current standards. I will say that. She could have very well been very beautiful in a different place in a different time. And as we know, what we consider to be beautiful as a culture changes over time. So she may just not have been pretty according to that culture standard at that point. But in spite of that, God still sees, hears, and knows her, and gives her something greater than any other than her sister God. So these are the two daughters. We have Leah, who is considered to not be the prettiest one, and Rachel is the one who is beautiful. She's graceful. She's beautiful. She is what people, according to this culture and standard at this time, have considered to be what you want to look like. And so Jacob, over this month that he has stayed there, has determined that he is in love with Rachel. Now, we know they are cousins. In our current society, we don't typically date and marry cousins. There are places and cultures in the world where that's acceptable. There are places and cultures in the United States where that happens. But in these situations, it is okay in the Bible. It's okay in the Bible. God did not say that cousins were not allowed to date, to marry, or have children. It is okay in the Bible. And that's all I got. So in verse 18, Jacob loved Rachel. He wanted her and he said, look, I will serve you for 7 years for your daughter's hand. If you promise me that you're not going to marry Rachel off to anybody else, if you allow her to remain unmarried, and I will work for you for 7 years. After 7 years, the value of my labor, 7 years worth of work. Think about how much money you would have made in 7 years on your job. That's what I'm giving you for your daughter. Now, you're not purchasing a daughter. A lot of times we like to think about this as a purchase. Like he was like, I worked for her. I own her. No, it's not that type of thing. This right here is traditionally like a bride price or a dowry. What it is one, it's a sign to show that this man has the means to provide for and care for your child. As a father, you want to make sure you are marrying your daughter off to somebody who has the means to take care of her. If this man can show me he has this much value, this much wealth, this many means, then I know that my daughter's going to be able to afford housing and be able to afford food and clothing and shelter and all the other things that she's going to need. I know that he has the effort and the means and the capability to care for my child. The other part of it is this is just a sign you've cared for and put a lot of energy and effort into making sure this is a very well-rounded, very cultured, very respectful woman. And this is like, hey, I just want to repay you for putting all that in there because I'm going to benefit from this. Our fathers, our parents don't really benefit from our kids being, or us as kids being successes, but our spouses and our future and our children do. So there is a level of thank you for pouring all of this into this person that I now get to plan and build my life with. And I get to benefit from everything that you put inside of this woman. So that's what this stands for. This is like, this is not, oh, I purchased her, I own her. This is not slavery. This is not any of those things. He doesn't own her. He didn't purchase her. None of those things. So that's not what that is. But this is him saying, you know, this is the value. I want to show you that I got the capability to earn and provide and take care of her. And so in verse 19, Laban agrees. He's like, you know, I know who you are. I know that you're good and you're respectful. I know that you have the means. I know you have the right culture. I know you have everything that it's going to take to make sure that my daughter is provided for and taken care of. So I agree. Let's do it. And so Jacob worked for 7 years. For 7 years he worked. And it says that it seemed just like a few days to him because he was so in love with her. He was so eager to have her as a wife that it didn't even matter that he had to work 7 years. That time flew by. He was counting down the days. It didn't matter to him how long it was. And so in verse 21, Jacob says to Laban, like, hey, give me my wife, man. Go on. Let's have this wedding, sir. My 7 years is done. I've given you the labor that I promised you, and I want you to go ahead and give me my reward for that. Let me get my pay. Let me get my pension. I put in a lot of time and effort for this. Let me get my payout. And so he is asked for his wife, and he's like, look, it's time. It's time. Now, it is not about to be nothing holy about this kiss right here that is talked about. This is not getting ready to be a moment where they are embracing as family. They about to embrace and make a family. That's the plan here. And so in verse 22, Laban gathers everybody to make a feast. They're having this big reception. It's this big party that's going to show that these people are married. We are going to celebrate together with them, this uniting of a new family, this creation of a new union. And so they have this whole thing, and it's good and dark in the end of the day. And so what he does is he brings his daughter Leah to Jacob. Now, Jacob is eager and excited. He has been waiting for 7 years for this woman. It is late. It is dark. They ain't got no overhead lights. They don't have no flashlights. They don't have none of that stuff. He got a little bit of candlelight, and he is so excited and ready to go that and it's the end of a feast. So there's probably a lot of drinking that was going on. And he may not be the most sober, but he knows I work for this woman. Her father's supposed to give him to me. He didn't even think he had to check. He just straightforward was like, let's go ahead and consummate this marriage. And he does. And so that next morning, and I'm skipping verse 24, but I'm going to come back to it. That next morning, he realizes it's Leah. He realizes that it's Leah. This isn't the one that I worked for. This isn't the one that I asked for. This isn't the one that we made a deal on. And so in verse 25, he says, what have you done? Like, why did you trick me? Why did you do that? Like, we made a deal and I held up my end. I did the work and I was expecting you to bring me Rachel. You tricked me. And he asked why. And so in verse 26, Laban says, it's not done like that in our country. Like where we are, you can't marry the younger daughter before the oldest daughter. Like they got to get married in order. Sorry, friend. I thought that Leah would have gotten married while you were waiting these 7 years. So since she's not, I had to marry you to her. But here's what happens. At the end of their wedding, you get a 7-day honeymoon. You get a week. You need to just enjoy your wife. You need to enjoy your time. So don't defraud my daughter of the right that she has as your wife now. Don't take away this week of time where you guys are supposed to be together and you're supposed to consummate this marriage, have your honeymoon, and enjoy yourself. Give her that. And when you come back, I will give you Rachel as well. You'll have two wives, and we'll do it that way. We'll fix it this way. And so, but you got to give me 7 more years. And if you really love Rachel, she's worth the 14. Like, you got to give me 7 more years. So Jacob does that. He spends the week with, so like, I want to pay attention to this because this is sometimes taught wrong. Jacob did so in verse 28 and completed her week. He had that week of honeymoon. He had that week away where it's just the two of them. Then it says in verse 28, then he gave Rachel as a wife also. So he doesn't put away Leah. He has 2 wives now that are sisters. It says he completed her week and then he got Rachel as the wife. Now, what we need to understand is he worked for 7 years, got married, realized it was Leah, had a 7-day honeymoon, then had a marriage to Rachel. They get another 7-day honeymoon, and then he has to work the 7-year debt that he owes. Because at this point, he owes 7 more years. He gave him the wife in advance. So there is a period of 2 weeks in there where he is honeymooning with his wives, and then he has to work off this 7-year debt that he has now incurred for the second wife. So he worked 7 years for Leah, and then he worked an additional 7 years for Rachel in the way that he should have gotten her in the first place. Now, I skipped verse 24. I'm going to put it with verse 29. Laban gave Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be a maid. So they have servants in their houses. They have people who have determined, sometimes servants are born into their households. Sometimes there are people who incur a debt and they have to work off this debt. And there's a period of years where they work off the debt. And there are other people who have this kind of lifelong thing. So they are servants. They've worked off their debt and then they determine, hey, I want to stay. There are times and places where there are wars and people are captured as part of winning this particular war. And those people are brought in as slaves or servants. And when you think about slavery in the Bible, and at this point, this is not the American slavery that we think about. This is more closely related to having a live-in maid, having a live-in butler, something like that. So I want us to make sure that we're looking at it that way because when we say he gave Zilpah, it's because there's a servant in his household. And when his daughter left, she left with someone she was familiar with to kind of help her manage this new household that she's moving into. And she's not moving from like her bedroom to down the hall. There's a separate tent on the land where she's going to now reside as a wife to Jacob, not like they're just down the hall in this one big house. They each have their own separate kind of tents in this land or this space that's theirs. And so in verse 29, Laban gave Bilhah to his daughter Rachel. So Rachel and Bilhah are together, and then Zilpah and Leah are together. Their names kind of have a little flow to them, a little symmetry, so it makes it a little interesting to remember. But Zilpah is Leah's, and Bilhah is Rachel's. And they're like maids that were like personal assistants, that type of thing, like someone that is with them. And so Jacob in verse, where are we? Verse 30, Jacob goes ahead, enjoys his week with Rachel, and then he starts to work off that 7-year debt he has now incurred. And so in verse 31, it says, when the Lord saw that Rachel was unloved, when God saw that he still loved Rachel more, he opened up the womb of Leah. And Leah starts to have sons. And at this time, to be the mother of a son, to be the mother of a man's legacy, to be the mother of this type of child, especially when it's the first child, is amazing. And this is a place where you can kind of hang your hat among other women. Yeah, I gave him sons. And you know, even though biologically it don't really have nothing to do with you, but for you to be able to give him sons is a kind of a little, it's like a little feather in your cap. It's like you get a little gold star because you were the one who was able to do that. And so when Leah begins to have babies, Rachel is unable to. Rachel is barren. She doesn't have any children. She has her husband's love, but she does not have any children. And so Leah has her first son. And her first son she names Reuben. And Reuben has the meaning, behold the son. And she feels like naming him this is going to help her husband see that she has a son, that she is now the wife that God has preferred, that she has the favor of God on her, and that she has given him something that nobody else has been able to give him. She's given him his first son, and he is going to look at her and feel something for her. He's going to love her because she was able to give him this thing. And so she has the second son in verse 33. And in this one, she names him Simon or Simeon. I like saying Simeon, so that's the way I'm going to say it. And it means he has heard, meaning God has heard her prayers. God has heard her cry for love and for affection. And God heard her and responded. And so now my husband is going to have to know, since I got two sons, I done gave him two babies back to back. Nobody else has had babies. My sister ain't popped none out. So why you loving her is wasted because I'm over here being fruitful. This is the thing that's been a pain in your side. This was the thing that you didn't want. This is the thing that's not pretty. This is the thing that's not loved about your life. And it's fruitful. It's the thing that's giving you the promise. It's giving you a future. It's giving you a legacy. And that's what we need to, we need to be paying attention to that. Sometimes God has stuff in our lives that doesn't look the way we want it to look. It's not the thing that we thought we wanted, but it's fruitful. And it's giving us what we're supposed to have. And it's creating a legacy and a life for us. And again, she has a baby. And so this third son, she names Levi. And Levi means joined. And she's like, look, this time my husband's going to be joined to me because I've given him 3 sons. He ain't got but 2 hands and he got 3 boys. I'm over here doing things that nobody else can do. And Rachel still hasn't had a baby. And so he's going to have to be joined to me. His heart is going to have to soften towards me. He's going to have to love me because I'm over here doing this thing. Now he keeps having babies with her. Even though it's not someone that he loves, he is still a partner in this. He is still with her. And sometimes we are in these situations that we find ourselves where we are attached to somebody that don't mean us no good, that don't really love us, and we keep pouring in and giving and giving and giving, and she is just giving and giving and giving, and she's in a one-sided relationship. And so in verse 35, my girl conceives again. In verse 35, she has another baby, and this baby she names Judah. Now, we always hear about Judah in the Bible. This is when Judah was born, and Judah was born at the end of 3 sons. He is the 4th son, and the name means to praise. And she says, look, this time I'm going to praise God. This time I'm going to thank God for giving me my children. This time I'm going to thank God for letting me be a mother. And if I don't ever get the love of this man, I know that I have 4 boys who love me and need me and rely on me. And I'm going to be a whole mom to them. I'm going to be a whole woman. And I'm going to be everything that God needs me to be and do everything that God needs me to do with or without him. And she learns to put her love and affection towards God instead of love and affection towards this man. She has turned her heart now to God and has decided to give praise and to be grateful and to be thankful for what she does have and not be focused on what she doesn't have. So I'm going to do a real quick recap because we've been here for a minute now. And in this one, Jacob has said he wants to marry Rachel. Rachel is effectively his cousin, but God in the Bible has determined that you can marry your cousin. This is not something that's unheard of or problematic at this point in the Bible. So he tells his uncle Laban, like, I'm going to work for you for 7 years. and that's my wages. At the end of 7 years, pay me by giving me your daughter's hand. And so he's not purchasing her. We talked about that. He's not purchasing her. This is more a bride price or a dowry. It's just to show you that I have the means to take care of your daughter. And that instead of that, she's worth more than this money to me. She's worth more than the wages. I just want her. And so he has this big feast. They have this big wedding party. They have this whole thing. And at the end of the night, they switch up and send Leah into his room. He is so excited and happy and probably very full of food and wine to and did not notice that he has the wrong sister. He wakes up the next morning and is like, this is Leah and this is not what I signed up for. So he goes to his now father-in-law Laban and says, look, you tricked me and you shouldn't have done that. And so Laban is like, look, I had to marry the oldest one off first. And so what he gives him now is he gives him his daughter Rachel. He said, finish out your week with Leah, and then you can have Rachel. You just owe me 7 more years for her. So he again works, and during this time that he is working off this new 7-year debt that he has, Leah begins to have babies. And so she has the first baby, and the first one is named Reuben, and it means behold a son, because she is unloved by her husband. He is still coming to see her. He is still spending time with her, but he is not, his heart isn't there. And so she's like, look, I've given him a son. Nobody else has done that. This is his firstborn child, and it's a boy. He has got to love me after this. And so she is like, look what I did. So this son's name is literally like, look at what we got. And the second son, because right after this, she has another baby. And she names him Simeon, and Simeon means he has heard, meaning she has called out to God and has said, look, I am unloved by this man. He loves my sister, but he continues to have babies with me. He continues to come and lay with me. He continues to be with me. And we find ourselves in these positions. Ladies, men, whoever, in whatever situation you are in, if you are connected to a person whose heart belongs to somebody else, who is loving somebody else, but continues to lay with you, close that door. Close that door. Close that door. Get on out of there. Close that door. Learn from this that you don't have to just continue to be downtrodden and beaten emotionally by a person. And in this one, she has the third son. And in the third son, she names Levi. And Levi just means join. And she's still hungry for his love and his affection. And she's like, look, clearly we have to be joined together now because I have given him 3 sons. And still my sister, who he loves, hasn't given him anything. And so finally, in her 4th son, she does what I just advised. She closes that door. And she says, she names this 4th son Judah. And Judah means to praise. And she said, I'm going to praise God. I'm going to praise God because I'm a mom and I have children and they love me and they need me. I am a whole person with or without his love. I am everything that God has called me to be, and I'm going to be that. And I don't need him for any of those things. I'm going to praise God. And she turns her heart from him, but turns her heart to God and begins to worship God and thank God and praise God for what she does have and not focus on what she doesn't have. So we are going to make sure that we are focusing on praising God for the things that we do have, that we are grateful, and that we are always having Judah moments in our lives. It doesn't matter who likes me or doesn't like me. It doesn't matter what's going on. God, I love you, and I'm going to praise you for that. Y'all be blessed.